Last, now everybody go to breakfast. Shayo, shayo, you go bow for the result, though. Nothing to discuss, cause I did win by default and without any doubt, though. I'm a me happy adult, I no go feed the girl, I no go feed the girl insult, though. I'm a mind that's you the talk, I put my life into my job and I know I'm in trouble. She manipulate my love, I know holy, and I know that get boss, like the Baba Frayo, my ayo, don't cry, yo. I need to go and shadow. 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 Shadow. I need to go and shadow. I need to go and shadow. I need to go and shadow. I dey Port run then kill Soboma. I dey try to buy moto, want Toyota Corolla. My feelings been they swing like Django Lover. Feelings been they swing like Django Lover. Now you crash your Ferrari for Lucky Bona. Now some more to remake could have been all over. My feelings today swing like Django Lover. Feelings today swing like Timbani at you. I'm a white dog in Fenisu. Why you say I did nothing for you when if I do anything you want me to do? Timbani at you. I'm a white dog in Fenisu. Why you say I did nothing for you when if I do anything you want me to do? Maybe another time, maybe another life. You will be my wife and we'll get it right. Young cast, last. Now everybody go to breakfast. Have to say bye-bye, yo. Bye-bye, yo. To the love of my life. My ayo, don't cry, yo. I need to go and shadow. I need to go and shadow.
Hi everyone, good afternoon to you all. Please mic check. Can you all hear me? Mic check. Can anybody hear me? You can just unmute yourself.
Loud and clear.
Awesome. Thank you very much. If you're just joining us, welcome on board. My name is Abisoye Falabi. I'm gonna turn on my mic shortly, just my video shortly, just trying to move all of this around. If you're just joining us for the first time, if this is the first time you're joining us for an event, you're welcome on board. This is dotnet. This is dotnet Lagos. We usually have events as often as possible, but this is the first of our virtual events for the year. So bear with me if I am kind of finding an odd or thereabout to move things around. Sorry, trying to push the slide up. Just a second. Today's event would basically be about .NET as usual. I know we've had other events that wasn't really speaking to .NET, that was just general knowledge or general purpose stuff, trying to ensure that, yes, as developers, we know how to present ourselves, be it how to prepare for interviews or things of that nature. But we're diverting a bit from that this period. We would just go ahead with the regular .NET conference style kind of events. We have well-meaning, experienced speakers, just as you can see from screen. We have Fadamiro, who is a software engineer at Microsoft and who has a ton of experience working as a software engineer, be it within the fintech space or financial services space or thereabout. I hope everyone can see me now. Okay. Who has a bunch of experience in that. We also have Dan. Dan is a developer relations at FusionAuth. We also have Adegoke, who is also a software engineer at Alat by Wema Bank. So I want to recommend or advise everyone to try as much as possible to stick around. There'll be opportunities to ask questions. Each speaker is going to do their presentation and also allow you to ask questions during their expected time. I know we are currently 3 minutes behind, but I found it important to allow the music finish, that is, respect the music, just not to kill anybody's vibes or thereabout. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Catherine, who will be taking us on .NET MAUI and what you need to know. Hi, Kate, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hello, Falabi.
Yeah, hi, Kate. Good morning.
Good morning.
To allow.
Oh, it's afternoon.
Yeah, it's already afternoon. Yeah. I think you should be able to share your screen. Yeah, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the warm welcome, Falabi. Like you said, my name is Fadamiro Catherine. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction about myself, and then we could move on to the agenda of today. Okay, so I'm a software engineer. I've been at Microsoft for over a year now. And before then, I worked with some fintech like AppZone and Polaris Bank. Basically, I started my tech journey while I was in school. That was when I learned C#, and I've been a C# person since then. It's kind of one of my strongest language because, as a developer, you start with something, and then that thing that you started with will be one of your best because it's something. It is what you started with. So, and then, like I said, I've worked with some fintech. I've worked with some startups. I've also picked 1 or 2 languages on my journey, and I'm glad to Falabi for inviting me to give this talk. Thank you so much. Okay, so let me share my screen now.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's taking a while. I'm just trying to.
No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, it's coming up. Yep.
Okay, so .NET MAUI. So the full pronunciation is .NET Multi-Platform App UI. So it's the name. It's a multi-platform framework and developed by Microsoft, obviously. So it was shipped with .NET 6. .NET 6, which was released, I think, maybe last 2 quarters. I'm not so sure. Here we go. So what is .NET Multi-Platform App API? It's a cross-platform framework for creating native mobile and desktop apps with C# and XAML. I don't know if we're familiar with XAML. It's like a way for you to build the presentation of your code. There are different components that you could use to build this thing. So we have the stack, the grid, and all those things, lots of components. And then we have C#, which is also what you could use to build, you could use with the .NET MAUI. So, I don't know if we're familiar with Xamarin, because if we're familiar with Xamarin, so .NET MAUI should be something that is easy for us to pick up and then start developing applications. So the unique thing about it is that unlike Xamarin, whereby you create different projects and for different platforms, this one on one single project, you have all your platforms together. You don't need to create different projects for different framework. So, and it allows you to develop apps that can run on Android, iOS, macOS, and Windows from a single shared code base, which is something that is really nice. It's a good feature. Like, you don't need to move around for you to develop things. And in just one single project, you can develop for different platforms, which is fantastic. So it's open source. So if you're using it and then maybe you find out that there's a modification you want to do, or there's an issue, like, you could go there, add your own support and your own code and make it a better platform. So like I said, it's used to create multi-platform apps using a single project. And also it's possible for you to add platform specific code. We know some platform may have different appearance or whatever it is you want it to have. It's easy for you to do that with .NET MAUI. So ability, okay, which is what I've explained. And then one of the key aims of .NET MAUI is to enable you to implement as much as of your app logic and UI layouts as possible in a single code base. That is what we're pushing. You have a single code base for everything. And it's also possible for you to develop, like, normally it's C# and XAML that you use to build your application, but you can decide to use just C# alone to build even both the front end and the back end. And it also allows you to bring in Blazon. Like, if you have a Blazon app, you can build it on top of your .NET MAUI. So here we have just a brief diagram to explain what we have, which is .NET 6, which I've said before, then .NET multi-platform app UI, and then we have iOS, Android, macOS, and Windows. And like I said, it comes with, it's shipped with .NET 6. So this is just like, just something to explain what platforms are available and the likes. And we have also control components, plugin libraries, and more, and different companies that are building for different components of .NET MAUI. And then we have beyond the UI, like you have access also to the API of your platform, like the sensor and everything. It's easy for you to access all those things with .NET MAUI. Then let's go to, so I have a sample project to just go through the scaffolded, it's like a scaffolded project actually, just to explain some of these components and how it's easy for you to build applications with .NET MAUI. Okay, so here we go. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so it's actually easy for you to use .NET CLI to install it, but I think the best way to enjoy building with .NET MAUI is to use Visual Studio 2022. And if you have that, you just need to update, and then you would have the ability to create projects and to create projects with it and publish the projects or whatever it is you want to do, or just to play around with it. And I think I saw that there was a, what's it called? There was a, I'm trying to remember. There's this like code for like just build for .NET, like build different designs for it. I think it's going to end by September 30th. I have the link. I'm going to post it in the chat. You could join the challenge and build beautiful projects and then submit them to the Git and see how that goes. So like I said, it's quite easy. It's just like building your normal projects, create a XAML app, the WPF app, whatever it is. It's the same thing with .NET MAUI. You create it, and then you have like a sample give me a second, please. Maximize. Okay, so you have perfect. So as you can see here now that we have just a single project, a single code base for us to work with. And then we see now that we have the platforms that are available. We have Android, iOS, Mac, and Windows. And resources. So resources is like where you have your images, your fonts, your style, like anything relating to the presentation or anything about your application, you put them under resources. So the main code entrance is the this my UI program. So as you can see there, it's just a simple class. There's not so much code there. It's just very simple and easy. And this is where we're declaring it to use the MAUI like app. We have configure fronts. Whatever fronts you want to use, you put them there, and then you're returning you're building the application. So it's quite simple to build, and it's less code, like I would say. And then we have the main page. So I'm going to run this application, and then we can see a sample of that. And then I'm going to be talking about some of the features. So we have auto reload, which is fantastic. So when you're building, like you're running your project, you make a certain change here. For instance, maybe change the name or whatever it is. It's easy for us to see that reflecting because we have auto reload already on ground. And then also there's a way for you to view, let me see if I could just start. Solution. So when I tried, like, created this project yesterday, I didn't have an emulator or something like that. It set it up for me. I didn't need to go and do anything. And here we have our app, and then I'm trying to show there's this. Okay. Sorry, give me a minute. There's this tool that I want to display. I want to show you, but it's like I can't find it. But anyway, I'm just going to talk about it. So, like I said, there's auto reload, and when you click on any of this property, there's a window for you to see actually what property you clicked on, and then to work on that property. Maybe you want to add color to it, you want to change the style, you want to do it off the fly, like you don't need to close, like stop the application and then make these changes and then start the application all over again. All you need to do is just make it on the fly, and it's going to rebuild. If it's C#, it's going to rebuild that part of the code you worked on and then push it back there, and then you're going to see your changes, which is something that is great and fantastic. And what else? So like I said, there are just lots of things to explore with this framework, and there's ability for you to use like the different sensors. Is easy for you to use. There's just a lot. So I actually just said I'm just going to do anything you want to do with it. Yeah, so it's taking a while to start up. This is one of the application I set up before. So let's go back to the slide. This is just me to explain a bit about the project and everything. So now let's go back to the slide and give me a minute. Okay. Sorry, please, can you see the slide now? Hello?
Now we can
No,
just see your screen.
Just your studio.
It's just your Visual Studio screen we can see at the moment.
Okay, let me resume. Sorry, let me resume. Can you see it now?
Not yet.
Hello?
I believe it's coming up. Not yet.
Okay, so pending the time it comes up. So so as a conclusion, like I said, like there are lots of things I didn't talk about at all, but I think it's something that we could take a look at and play with and just see how we could build amazing solutions with .NET MAUI. Thank you so much. Any questions, please?
Yeah, so this time for questions, Q&A. If you have any questions, this is a good time. Just raise up your hands on the on Zoom, and then I would unmute you. Though there was a question, if anybody has a question that doesn't want to speak, you can just drop it on the chat. I think there was a question that was dropped while you were speaking, Kate. The first question is, Catherine, nice tab indentation and coloring. Is that specific to VS 2022, or there's an extension for that? Hello, Kate. Are you there? Hello, Kate.
There's an extension for it. I can't remember the name, but I could look for it and drop it.
Okay, no problem. Then secondly, I think
hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Kate. Yeah, we heard your response.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, Kate.
Hello.
Yeah, network ish. Kate, we can hear you. We heard your response. I think Umar already acknowledged that. So just help us just get the name of the extension.
Okay.
And then share.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, we can hear you, Kate. Okay, I think the other question was okay, the other one was a question about, has anybody done a project from using with MAUI? Yeah, Timothy, yes. There's someone in our midst that has done a project. That's Emeka Solomon. He has a app in the Play Store. You can just check the chat section. You would see the message there. He dropped the link to the app he deployed to that I published to the Android Play Store as it is. So yes, to answer your question, yes, somebody has done that. I think the other question directed at Kate, can a single code base be used for both web? Why is this thing going away? Can a single code base be used for both web app and desktop app?
Sorry, can you come again? Can a single code base
Can a single code base be used for both web app and desktop app?
Yes, but for the web app, you have to use Blazon for that.
Okay.
But for yes, for desktop app is normal.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the other, okay, Kate already shared the link. Umar, Kate already shared the link to the, okay, yeah, the beautiful UI challenge for those who would want to take part in that challenge. We're going to post the link on our WhatsApp group. I'm doing that now. Yeah, I put it on the WhatsApp group. Then the other question to you, Kate, is how easy it is to have your MOA app on iOS, like deploying it and being available on the iOS store. I think that's the easy. That could be like an easy question to ask. I think one of the challenges people used to have when they're trying to deploy to what's it called, to the iOS store is declaring what's it called, declaring the permissions and resources they need that they will require the user to know that they are making use of. That is quite important for those who are just deploying apps to the iOS store for the first time. But I think aside from that, once you are ready to publish from your Visual Studio 2022, just as Kate recommended, you can just do a deploy or a publish to have your packet or package file that you use to submit to the iOS store. Next question. Okay, any certificates on MOA? Sorry, Emeka, can you, I don't understand that question. Can you expatiate? Are you saying any certification or are you referencing a packet or thereabouts? Emeka Solomon, please, if we could, I don't know if you're still here. Oh, okay, you're referring to certification. I don't think there is at the moment. Yeah, I don't think there is at the moment, but you can always check Microsoft Sats. I would drop the link to that shortly, but I could see that someone said they are not on the group. If you're not on our WhatsApp group, I'm gonna help you out now and just copy the link to the, oh, okay. I'm gonna paste the link. I've pasted the link to everyone so everyone can see it. Yes, that works. A couple of links will be posted there. So as regards certification, no, I don't think there's anyone at the moment. I know they will bundle it with they'll probably bundle it with something, but I think Microsoft certification has been in the recent days has tilted towards more of job title, job specific. So if you say you're a cloud developer, Azure developer, you're leveraging Azure and you're a developer, that's what they are focusing on. If you're saying you're a solution architect, you're doing solution architect. If you're saying you're an administrator, just focusing on administrator stuff. Yes, Umar, thank you very much for dropping the link to the certifications. Then Umar asked the question, what monitoring and logging tool are available for .NET MAUI? Yeah, Kate, I think that question is for you, but I think from the top of my head, if you're deploying to Azure, application insights would work. I don't know if they still support the application insights desktop or the ones that comes with Visual Studio, as the case might be, but I know if you're deploying to Azure, that works.
Yes. Okay. So like Falabi said, yes, I know about application insight. I didn't really look so much into the login part of it, but I'm sure like there are tools available for to log for .NET MAUI, and I'll check it out and paste the link here.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, any other questions from anyone? We have just 3 more minutes before we close this section. Oh, okay, we still have a couple of minutes for the first talk. Any other person with any questions? Any questions, please feel free to drop a question. Please also help share the meeting link. You can tweet it on what's it called? You can paste it on Twitter or any of the dev WhatsApp group you're on, for everyone that wants to help inform every other person about the event. I would most likely be sending out a tweet now so we can all retweet as much as possible. Okay, I think just tweeted this. Okay, to everyone in the meeting. We can just retweet this. Yeah, Dan was saying, Catherine, thank you. That was an informative session. Okay, Samuel, Emeka Solomon said thanks. Okay, yeah, so everyone, we can just try to retweet the link I just posted. I just posted a Twitter link to a tweet I just made. You can just help retweet it or just mention one or two things that you have gained from this session. I can see, I think we have one of these crazy hackers joining us because the username looks quite weird. Or some of these bloppers. I think we had one the last time. So don't be surprised if we just have someone join the call and just saying blah, 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 or just shouting or anything. They're typical bots or thereabouts that join calls to do such things or trying to take over calls. Okay. I think we would be moving on. Do we have any other questions before we move on? Any other question? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you so much for your session. We really appreciate. I think before bringing on the next speaker, we'll be having Dan. Dan will be speaking to us. Dan works as developer relations at FusionAuth. Will tell us what FusionAuth is about and also go over his session as well. Okay, Dan, I think you have the floor now.
Great. Let me share my screen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I'm coming to you from Colorado in the USA, but it's great to learn about .NET. I will confess that most of my background is in Java or PHP or Ruby. I did write one small .NET project, and I'll show you that, but I'll show you pieces of that. But
sorry, as I said, we would have a number of people. Okay, our first meet. Now they've taken over the space. Okay. I'm trying to see who is making the annotation. John Smith. Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah, so I've muted everyone. So I'm trying to card. Yeah. trying to grab them one by one. Yes. Okay. Okay. Ikem, are you human or I should? Okay. Let me just remove this John. This guy isn't.
Hey, you are gay?
Okay.
Ебать.
Okay, you are gay?
Я трахаюсь, дебилы.
Do you like gay cocks?
Okay.
Do you
Well,
like big black gay cocks?
okay. Yeah, it's serious violence. Like, yeah, okay. So funny enough, luckily we have a waiting room. So I was the one who clicked on admit all. No, we don't need to create a new link. We'll be able to isolate. Yeah. We'll be able to,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, we'll be able to isolate a number of them. Please, who is phone? You have 5 seconds to unmute yourself, or else I yank you off. Please, who is phone? Phone. I think phone has removed himself. Okay. Yeah, phone is still here. Phone, are you human? We are from Ukraine. Oh, I've seen you. Yank you off. Thank you. I don't know you. Sorry, bro. Okay. Okay. I think I'm admitting Ajani Okbayemi looks human. Wow. That was good. That was quite interesting. All right, Dan. Over to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Always good to have a little surprise happen. Thank you for taking care of that. Really appreciate it. So, as I was saying, I just want to be clear that I'm not a .NET developer. I've done 1 or 2 small projects in .NET, but JSON Web Tokens, which is what I'm going to talk about, is something you can absolutely use in .NET, and you can use as a means of conveying information across different systems. So if you have a heterogeneous system that has .NET and Java and PHP, JSON Web Tokens can be used by all of them. So yeah, so real quick about FusionAuth. It is an authentication authorization platform. It's similar to Auth0 or Keycloak, or in the .NET world, there's something called Identity Server, and all those things have similar functionality. What they do is move things like user login, user forgot password, registration of users, moving users between groups into a standalone system. Azure AD is very similar too, right? Azure AD is a little bit more enterprisey and kind of a big beast, but it does the same thing, right? It holds all your user data so that you as a developer can focus on building features that your users actually want to use, as opposed to login screens and other things that are pretty typical and undifferentiated. Real quick about me, who cares? There's my Twitter handle. You can look me up on Twitter or Google me if you want to know more. So what I'm going to talk about today in the 20 or so minutes I have is JSON Web Tokens briefly, the problem they solve, how to validate them, things to be aware of when you're using what are called bearer tokens, and I'll talk about what bearer tokens actually are, common issues I see with JSON Web Tokens, and then key signing. And the last one is something that I find took me a while to get my head around to understand. So we're going to talk about that. So real quick about JSON Web Tokens, it's actually pronounced JWT. It's an RFC standard. So you can go, if you want some bedtime reading, you can go read that. It's about 12 pages. They can be signed or encrypted. And the difference is that if you sign a JSON Web Token, you know that it hasn't changed, that you can verify that the integrity of the JSON Web Token is confirmable. Whereas if they're encrypted, you can actually hide secrets in there. So that's a very important takeaway. If you use a JSON Web Token, you want to make sure that you don't put any private information in it unless you encrypt it. It's much more common to be signed than encrypted. I don't think I've ever actually seen an encrypted JSON Web Token. We use them as stateless portable tokens of identity. This means that you can put them in HTTP headers, you can put them in cookies, you can pass them around, and they can be verified without contacting a central server. That means the APIs and microservices can use them, right, to provide, if you're trying to figure out who is calling me, if the API accepts a JSON Web Token, it can look at who called it and know that that person or entity was what called the API and microservice. So they're widely supported. You have great documentation. The RFC was actually codified in 2017, so it's about 5 years old. A lot of documentation, a lot of helper libraries, and you should leverage those when you're working with JWTs. So let's take a step back and look at the problem. Suppose we have a over-engineered over-engineered to-do application where we will have users that are going to be able to create to-dos like, hey, make sure that you attend .NET Conf Nigeria, or make sure you check out that cool new framework that Catherine talked about, NET MAUI, or however you pronounce it. And you would have two APIs, right? An API for people to log in and an API for people to actually add to-dos to a list. The to-dos table might look a little bit something like this, where you have an ID, you have the text of the to-do, whether it's done or not, and then you have a user identifier. And one thing that's important to note is that because we're in a distributed system, you don't have relational integrity between the user's database and the to-dos database. That's why this line right here is not a foreign key. So what does the process look like for an actual end user? They're going to post some credentials to an endpoint, and this is probably going to be a some kind of login endpoint, and they'll pass credentials like a username and password. What happens after that? Well, let's kind of walk through a couple of options. The first is we post, again, those credentials, and the user API verifies those credentials. And by the way, the verification of those credentials, that's outside the scope of this talk. We're not worried about that. That's something that Azure AD, that identity server, that FusionAuth is going to do. We don't care. At some point, the user comes back, typically is JSON, and it might look a little bit something like this, where you have an identifier, you have a name, some other information about the user. And then one possible solution to get the to-dos for that user is for the client to peel off the user ID, right? 42, pass that to the to-do API, and then the to-do API looks up the to-dos and then sends back JSON, right? The list of to-dos. And then from there, the client can render them, right? Using .NET MAUI or any other language. We don't really care what happens on the rendering side, but we want to make sure the user can actually see their to-dos. So I have a quick poll. Does anyone, what do people think that this is a good idea? You can just give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the participants' reaction. Got a thumbs up, a couple thumbs up. feel like I should play some music. No, you don't want to hear me sing, trust me. All right, so a couple people will say thumbs up. It's actually a little bit dangerous to do it like this. And the reason is that the client can notice, oh, hey, I'm passing user ID equals 42. I wonder what happens if I pass user ID equals 1. Do I see anybody else's to-dos? And the issue there is that the to-do API doesn't have any way, if you use this kind of implementation, the to-do API doesn't have any way to know who is actually making that request, right? And so even worse, it could be something that isn't an actual client. It could be, you know, some other server someplace else that's just scanning through all the to-dos. And it's important to keep to-dos safe and secure. So let's talk about two different approaches. The first is what I'm going to call the opaque token approach. And in this situation, the user API, again, which remember is authenticating the user, it's checking their credentials, it's doing whatever it needs to do. It's going to create a little gray token that is just a long string. And it passes that token to the client along with the user data. The client then extracts that token and passes it to the to-do API. So instead of passing user ID equals 42, it passes a string that's like ABC, DEF, or something like that. The to-do API gets that token and then asks the user API for the user that matches that token. And so the user API says, oh yes, I recognize that token. This person just authenticated. Here's their user data. That means that if you have a malicious client, they can't modify that token, because if they pass a token that is DEF ABC instead of ABC DEF, well, the user API won't recognize the token and won't return any data. And then the to-do API will just say, hey, this is not a valid request. So this is a great way to ensure the integrity of the token. Ensure the integrity of the to-do API, because it's always checking with the user API to say, hey, is this a valid request? This is a totally valid approach. It does require you to maintain a user to token mapping, and that has to happen someplace, right? Either in memory, and then you have issues if you have to restart anything, or in the database, and then you have issues about, you know, data storage. It's the biggest issue I see with this is that it basically couples the user API to everything. So every request that comes in for the to-dos, you're taking that token and you're asking the user API, again, you're asking the user API, hey, is this a valid token? So if the user API is slow, or it's down, or it's unavailable for whatever reason, suddenly no one can look at your to-dos, even if there's a network blip between the two. It is worth noting that this is actually OAuth introspection, which is another RFC, if you want some more bedtime reading. So JWTs are a different way of solving this problem. And what they do is they similar to the opaque token, when the user authenticates, the user API creates a JWT. That JWT is passed down to the client. The client passes that to the to-do API, and the to-do API passes back data. Now you'll notice that there was no callback to the user API here, unlike the previous one. And the reason for that is that a JWT is self-contained and can be verified by the to-do API without talking to the user API. And that is one of the huge wins of a JSON Web Token. It can be signed in a couple of different ways, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the validation is fantastic. And then the other thing that's beneficial about JWTs is they aren't just, they can actually contain metadata. So they can contain information like, what role does this user have? Or is this user a paid user or a free user? So it's enough kind of diagrams. Let's actually look at some JSON Web Tokens. So this is a JSON Web Token. If you cut and paste this into a JSON Web Token debugger, you'll see a real live JSON Web Token. And there are three parts. The green is the header, the blue is the payload, and the white is the signature. The header and the payload are really just base64 URL encoded strings, so that they go nicely into an HTTP header or a cookie or a form parameter, something else. The header of the JWT is metadata about it. So this says what algorithm was used to sign it, is, you know, what type is the JWT, because there can be multiple different kinds of JSON Web Tokens. The payload is where things get really interesting. And the payload is where you have the data that the to-do API is really interested in. Now, I'm going to dive into this a little bit deeper later, but the important thing to know is, one, you can put anything you want in here. Two, if it's a signed JWT, you want to make sure that you don't put anything secret in there. Three, some of these keys of this JSON object are standardized. And really the keys of the JSON object, if it's a JSON Web Token, are called claims. And I found that confusing when I started out in the auth space. So if you read about claims, you can, they're really just keys in this JSON object. So again, some claims are standardized and then other claims are not. But you can see that like the roles claim right here is an actual array. So you can have an array of arrays or an array of objects of arrays or whatever you want. It's just JSON that gets turned into this nice string. The other thing that happens is that it's signed. And this is, again, what lets us verify the integrity of the JWT. So I see a question pop up. I'm going to hold that for a second, and then I will answer it. I just want to get this point. Thank you for the question. So when we do signature generation, basically we take the header and the body and we run a cryptographic operation over it. And then the operation varies by the algorithm, but we can then, so it's signed by the user API, and then we can verify it at the to-do API. So this is really kind of critical. And again, most of this is going to happen via a library. It's not going to happen via you doing this. But it's important that you understand what's happening, because that means that you can trust the JSON Web Token. So the question is, can we mix Microsoft Identity with JSON Web Tokens? And the answer is yes, I believe. Again, I'm not an experienced .NET developer, but I did use a .NET sample project, and I'll share that link with that. And basically, Microsoft does play well with JSON Web Tokens, and I'll show you some code in a little bit. Oh, Ismail says, yes, you can as well. Great. Okay, so the other important thing you need to do with JSON Web Tokens is you need to validate them. So that, again, we're talking about the to-do API here. The to-do API receives this JSON Web Token, and it cannot, absolutely not, just look at the JSON and pull out the user ID and pull out the to-dos. It has to do this validation. And this is really important, because otherwise, if you don't do the validation, you're in the same spot you were back when you accepted user ID 42, where a malicious client can do whatever they want and like probe your system and get those precious to-dos. We want to be careful about that, right? So the first thing you do, as I mentioned earlier, is validate the signature. This is typically going to be a library, and Identity Core was the library I used in my ASP.NET Blazors project. I don't have a best practices library to recommend to you for .NET, especially more modern .NET, but I probably would start out by just Googling open source .NET JWT validation and see what pops up. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you than that for this particular tech stack. If the validation doesn't work, then you want to stop, right? Because that means that someone played with the header or the body, the payload of the JWT, and therefore you can't really trust it. The next thing you need to do is validate the claims. And this is business logic, and this is something that you have to do. Some libraries will help you out, but you really have to write it. So what do I mean when I say validate the claims? Well, this is the payload again, and I'm going to show you 3 claims that you have to validate. Sometimes libraries will help you a little bit, but you should always check these. And then obviously you need to check any other claims that matter. So the first claim you should look at is the issuer, and that's the ISS claim, and that is who created the JSON Web Token. So in the case of our over-engineered to-do application, the user API is the issuer, right? That is who, the entity that created the JWT. the next thing you want to look at, and again, the issuer can be a domain name like it is here. It can be a URL, it can be a string, it can be a UUID. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as the user API and the to-do API agree on what a valid value is. The next thing you want to validate is the expiration date. And this is the number of seconds since January 1st, 1970. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that's in the future, because if that's not in the future, then the token has expired and you shouldn't accept that as a valid token. The audience is important too. And the audience is who this JWT was for. So in the case of our engineer to-do application, the to-do API is the audience. And the reason why you need to make sure that the JWT was generated for you before you accept it and move on is that a bad actor might get a JWT for the to-do API, and it might be a valid one that they've authenticated against the user API and they get the JWT, but now they present that JWT to other APIs, like an accounting API. And I don't know about you all, but I think that an admin role in the to-do API is probably going to have different permissions and be able to do different things than an admin role in the accounting API. And you don't want to let someone escalate their privileges by presenting a JWT to a different API and having that API accept it. Bad idea. So real quick, I'm going to show you some code. And again, I apologize. This is going to be some JavaScript, and then I'll show you some .NET code. But basically, and sorry, I use Vim. So this is just kind of a super simple explanation of using JWTs to encode and then decode things. So we have right here, like lines 13 through, lines 1 through 16 are the user API, right? So this is the thing that's generating a JWT. You're probably not going to do this too often, but it's possible that you will. And again, we have our expiration, our issuer. We're using a library just called the JSON Web Token Library. And again, we can add whatever claims we want. Country, USA. Well, actually, let's do it. And then we have the to-do API, which down here, good question. I'm going to talk about SSO in a little bit, but here's the to-do API. So here's our to-do API that is using on line 31. We're using the library to verify the signature, which again is really important. And then after that, we can add our additional verification checks. And in this case, we might say verified.country is not equal to Nigeria, invalid location. So again, it's super simple checks. You're typically looking to see if something matches the value or a set of values, but you need to do this. So, and then from here, this would be, instead of logging, proceed with data. I just didn't write a full backend for this because it's a demo app, but this is really where you would say, okay, we've gotten through all this stuff. We have the correct location. We have the correct premium user. We're the correct audience. Let's go ahead and give the data, whatever data we're protecting with this JWT. So if I you can see that I can generate the JWT, and then so this is the user API that's putting this out, the faux user API, and then this is the actual JWT right here. You can see it has country. If I go ahead and change this to the country that I'm actually in, it blows up because I have the invalid location. So that means that I can trust that this JWT is being handled correctly. All right, so the question is, can JWTs help with SSOs? And is there any material that can help with this? And SSO is something that can be implemented in a lot of ways. And the way I've typically seen it used are actually with SAML or with OIDC, which stands for OpenID Connect. And both SAML uses XML. OpenID Connect can use JWTs, but that's kind of a lower level concern for it. The actual protocol is what handles the SSO rather than the JWT. So the JWT can be like a marker of a valid login session, but it's not going to give you the whole solution. All right. Oh, wait, I should show. This is .NET. And, so this is a small .NET application, and I'm not going to demo it because I added this 20 minutes ago, but I'm just going to walk through the code. And I did show you the code that is linked in the presentation, which I'll make available to you all. And I will confess that this is .NET 3.2. I haven't had a chance to update this application, so please forgive me. We have some configuration here in the, let me just do so we have a very simple application, sample app. We have a lot of the same things. I'm using the .NET CLI, and we have some, the authority is going to map to the issuer. We have a client ID, which maps to the audience. And where it really gets interesting here is basically I'm using Microsoft authorization, and I am on line 43 right here. I'm requiring that the claim that comes in the JSON Web Token matches the client ID that I have in my configuration. So again, I'm checking that audience claim. And then on lines 46 through 75, that's where I'm actually setting up the authentication. So with this Microsoft authentication, I think I'm also using an open source library called Identities. What's it called? Identity model. That's what it's called. So that and it's unclear to me exactly what parts are Microsoft and what parts are identity model. Again, I apologize for my lack of understanding, but this actually will prompt you if it doesn't see a cookie with a valid JWT, it will prompt you for to authenticate you, and then it will it validates the audience for you, and then you can protect different pieces, different pages with the JSON Web Token. Thank you, Ismail. And I'm actually kind of running out of time. So do I have an extra 5 minutes because of the unwanted visitors, or do I need to wrap it up?
Oh, my mic was muted. Yes, you do. Your session ends by 1:25, so you still have 10 minutes, 9 minutes.
Great. Actually. Cool. Thank you so much. Cool. So Simi asks, going back to the JavaScript code, you specified the HMAC algorithm. There is, and that's on line, line 126. There are 5 or 6, well, there might be 7 or 8 different algorithms. There's HMAC, which is for symmetric situations, and I'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. And then there's RSA and ECC, and there may be others out there, but if we look at the actual RFC 7519, it specifies, oh boy, this is kind of HMAC. Sorry, I shouldn't go to the RFC. Yes, there's 5 or 6 different algorithms you can use. So they definitely, you have options. So real quick about bearer tokens, I gotta kind of hustle because I have 8 minutes and I would definitely want to allow some more time for questions. Var tokens basically are any kind of token that you can present that aren't tied to the caller. So if I find a JSON Web Token that Ismail authenticated and got, and I somehow can grab it out of his browser, then or his or her browser, then, so I don't know your gender, Ismail, then I could represent myself as them. And that's a bad idea. You need to protect the tokens. You can do that in a couple of different ways. You can store it on the server side because that gives you more control. You can push it down as an HTTP only secure cookie in the browser. And then you can also use secure storage on mobile. And I imagine you could use secure storage on something like .NET MAUI if you needed to. Some common issues you run into: you don't do validation. If you don't do validation, just like if you don't do validation on a form parameter or anything else, you're going to run into issues. You make sure you check your claims. Don't put secrets in a JSON Web Token because they can leak information. So don't put IDs, don't put government IDs, don't put anything that you wouldn't want someone to be able to see, because again, if it's a signed JSON Web Token, anyone who can get their hands on it can look at the contents. They can't change the contents, but they can look at them. You want to make sure if you use the HMAC that you use a really long key, because it can be brute force otherwise, and that's a open source project that can do that. Ismail asks, PII shouldn't go in there. Typically not, right? Unless you kind of control your network. But yes, I would just put in an identifier for the user that's not PII. And then, I mean, to some extent, you can consider an email PII. So I guess you want to be careful. I think I've often seen a PII email in the JSON Web Tokens, but certainly no sensitive PII. I wouldn't want in there. Don't use the none algorithm. That's a common issue. If you don't, the none algorithm means there's no signature, which means that there's no integrity check. So this is a perfectly valid JSON Web Token. It doesn't have a signature, which means that any API that accepts that basically is saying that anybody can represent themselves as anybody else, as long as they can figure out what the correct JSON is to pass. That's a really bad idea. So don't use the none algorithm. And FusionAuth doesn't even let you do that. I'm going to cover asymmetric key pairs real quick. So with this situation, we have the JSON Web Token. We basically have a shared secret. If we're using the HMAC algorithm, the user API signs with secret S and then passes the JSON Web Token down. And then the client passes up to the JWT API, which needs to verify it with that same secret. And that obviously means that you have to share the secret between the two. And that means that anyone who gets access to the JWT API and can find that secret can now issue JSON Web Tokens that are indistinguishable from those that are issued by the user API. Asymmetric key pairs let you avoid this. The private key signs the JWT and the public key verifies it. That matters for two reasons. One is scale. So you can actually have the user API be run by a different organization like FusionAuth or Microsoft, and they can sign the JSON Web Token with a private key. And then your organization can verify that at the to-do API. And so this lets you scale your organizations out, or scale kind of who owns creating the JSON Web Token. The other thing that matters is, as I mentioned earlier, security, right? This JSON Web Token is signed, if you're using a shared key, is signed by the same secret that's used to verify it over here. And that means that the JWT API needs to be as protected and as secure as the user API. So reasons why not to use asymmetric keys: it's a little bit slower, it's more complex to understand. You also have to share public keys. Right here, the JWT API actually needs that public key, and it has to get it somehow when it wants to verify that the JWT was signed by the corresponding private key. You can distribute the keys, right? You could just have it be part of the deployment artifact, the public key, or there's another standard out there which basically has the user API can publish the public key. And the To API can once in a while, when it needs to, go out and grab that certificate or that public key. It looks like this. And the important thing is, in the public key definition, there's a key identifier, that thing that starts with UK0 right there. And that actually matches the key identifier in the JSON Web Token. So that's how the To API knows which public key to use to verify the signature. And I'm going to skip through everything else because I want to make sure that you all have a chance to ask at least 1 or 2 questions. Thank you. Here's a bunch of links. As I said, I'm going to make this available to the organizer. And one thing I'd say is we have an example with ASP.NET Core. Again, that's the one I showed you that is a little bit old. We have the JavaScript code I showed you is available as an open source project too. I've written a couple of things about JSON Web Tokens, and you can download FusionAuth for free and run it yourself if you can use Docker or on Windows, Mac, or Linux. And with that, thank you. If anyone has any questions, I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Any questions? Okay, I can see a couple of questions. Does Fusion SDK have NuGet package to integrate with .NET?
Yes, we do. I will say that we've had comments where people have said your .NET NuGet package feels like it's written by a bunch of Java developers, and that's because it was. But we definitely have it. So if you go to FusionAuth, yeah, so we have a client out there that you can install. And that lets you do things like add users, do other things to FusionAuth as well. But the one thing that's worth noting is that FusionAuth should work with those kind of standard Microsoft libraries if it's just plain old OIDC. You don't need to use the .NET Core client unless you want to do other, like drive other things and automate other things with FusionAuth. Great question. Anything else, or are we free to move on to the next presentation?
Okay, do we have any other question? Asking what's the costs?
So you can, if you run FusionAuth yourself, you can run it for free. So you'd have to host it and run it yourself. If you want us to host it for you, it costs money. The pricing is on the pricing page, and we do have premium features, but it's a full featured, the communication's full featured, and if you run it yourself, so if you host, the community plan is free for unlimited users. So you basically just run it yourself as a Docker container. I think you'd probably run on Render. I know you could run on Heroku, although that's now costs money. So yeah. All right. I am over time, so I want to say thank you all. I'm going to hang around for the last presentation, but I will also get the slides available over to share in the WhatsApp group.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other question? Anybody with any other question? Before we go on a quick musical break, we're definitely going to be playing some Afro pop or Afrotainment just for a quick 5 minutes break before the last presentation. Okay, in the absence of no other question, we'll just go ahead and let's go for a quick 5 minutes break, and we would be back. Okay, where thou? Okay.
Tune into the king of songs and blues.
Olaladimi Ashake. Come up with a kind of killer. This your level getting me for my body. I want light man with my lighter. This your color no be fake, oh mommy. My banana, oh my banana, don't chop my banana. Show me power, but me power. And let me love my life. It's my like, my Sudana. Cause you dey amazing, your body amazing. Don't be late, don't keep me waiting. No procrastinating, terminator. You don't get agreement, do not terminating. Me right now, idale kamo right now. Fadamiro right now. Famimora baby, okay, she might know. I'm a petty great I do. Yeah, my village, Mr. Money, move available. You be my cross, my available. Give me my baby, baby, go kada. I deliver, stay banana, oh my banana. Go chop my banana. Show me power, boni power. And let me love my life. It's my like, my Sultana. Cause you dey amazing, your body amazing. Don't be late, don't keep me waiting. No procrastinating, terminator. You don't get agreement, do not terminating. Give me fuck you up for. Can't you kill it. If you no go mind, make I be on my door. If you never know, must have me that you're slow man.
Tune into the king of sounds and blues.
Thank you all very much. We are back for the last session. I hope you all enjoyed the musical break as much as I did anchoring this. The DJ that we've had today is my humble self, Falabs on Twitter. Just trying to ensure that we have a mix and balance in during our session, because yes, I know that just having to speak all technical, moving from 3 sessions without having like a break for one to move around or exercise as it's been recommended in this day of working remotely isn't so good or healthy. So reason why we decided to introduce that into the mix. Okay, moving on to our last session. It's going to be taken by one and only Adegoke Similoluwa, a software engineer at Alat by Wema Bank. Wema Bank is one of the foremost banks in Nigeria that has that rolled out an awesome product called Alat a few years back, which was one of the most innovative banking app for years back to back. And they've been doing quite a lot of recent. They've been having lots of competition and all of that. A backstory to Mr. Simi. Mr. Simi has been a C# developer right from his undergraduate days. He has been part of the community way back from when we started right from college, and he has been consistent and all. Let's welcome Mr. Similoluwa Adegoke. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction, Falai. Please, can everyone hear me? I think. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you. There seems to be a feedback, like echoing from your side. I guess the what's it called? I think your mic playing back what is being fed from your speaker.
Okay, what about now? Is it better?
Oh, perfect. Awesome.
Okay, I think the headphones are the one. So okay, so as Falabi said, I've been writing C sharp for a long time now, and working professionally, I've been working in fintech. So that's I joined Wema Alat, I call it Alat, right? I joined it this year, so I'll be sharing my screen and then we get right on it. Okay, so can we all see my screen?
And yes, we can. You can just
Okay,
maximize it. You can maximize the screen resolution. So yeah, cool.
okay. So revealing software architecture using folder structure. So here's a little bit of background. Sometimes okay, personally, this is actually a personal you pick up a software document because now I have to. I'm not there when they started, so most of the times I have to pick up old code, right? So they tell you that this software architecture is actually client server. Now that's what the doc says. But when you see the folder structure, you have something like this. I mean, this is quite familiar to anyone that uses MVC. This is how you see your MVC straight up created. So I'm like, well, it was good at the point, but then when your project comes bigger, you have this thinking in software and architecture like client server and thinking in your code. And I believe as developers, it will be way easier for us if we think alike. Like the way you drew the architecture in your head, how it should look, transfer it directly to your code. So that's what I'm talking to. You have a number of architectures that we are quite familiar with. Okay, so this is a quote before we go there. Uh, this is for me, personally, and I think said every developer is a writer. So when another coder picks up your code, you are telling them a story, guiding them through a path of knowing what is going through your code. Do let your code speak directly of the architecture. I know a lot of code they perfectly work the way they are, but we know these are things we know. When you pick up another code, you're oh, so that's one thing we could look into. Every developer is a writer. So there are some common software architectures, right? So these are quite familiar. But the most common one, we have a client server architecture, a model view control architecture. I'm just picking up a few. This is a layered architecture. So, for example, if you're building an application that is a client server architecture, so I want to go into your code. If your doc says client server architecture, client server, so I want to go into your code and see a client folder. And I mean, it will be a way of thinking directly. So you go into the client folder and then you've seen, for example, if you're writing a front end, a web application, you'll be seeing HTML and CSS in the client folder. And if you're using C sharp, you'll be seeing the CSS class file in the server. So that's the thinking in the server folder. So we have a model view control architecture. I mean, this is what we have presently when you create an MVC app in .NET. So we have layered architecture. Layered architecture, you have the presentation. This mostly accustomed to mobile apps, web apps. Then we have the peer-to-peer architecture. This is what the architecture of blockchain apps, right? And so, these are actually the fundamental architectures, but I think this microservice architecture, we can agree that it actually can include one or two of all those architecture, right? So then there is actually, so if you want to transform your architecture into your folder structure, there's one thing that is always a stumbling block, and that is a template. For example, you create an app, HTML, a web app in .NET. It's already an MVC architecture from start. But what if your source doc was client server architecture? What if your source doc was a layered architecture where you have the UI, the presentation, and all those sorts? So this is there. So the thing here is every template must, you have to make it fluid. number, like a Clayman. It's going to give you something, but the fluidity is the beauty of it now. So I want us to. So for example, let's go into building something. We have when you build a .NET architecture and MVC app using .NET, you have something like this. This is the controller, the views, the model. This is the architectural pattern you have. Then the transforming it to this is the beauty. It's telling the story exactly that. Okay, this is a design doc that is client server. We have a template that's an MVC. We have to do a number of legwork, right? But we have folder structure that speaks directly to the architecture. So this is an example of an MVC, and this is the result. So if I open the client folder, you see that these are all things that, okay, so one of the thinking here is the welcome controller. I classified it as a client in this case because a controllers in .NET should be linked. So you're just redirecting between the view and fetching from the server. So I classified it as a client. So you see all these files, they are view, they are files that are pertaining to the client. So we have the views, we have this WWT, which if you have created a project in .NET, you would be familiar. It contains the static files. So the JavaScript, the CSS, and the HTML, if cases be. So there are actually two. So for this code, let me switch to my code for better. Sorry. So this is the code itself running. So for us to achieve these, taking the code from MVC architecture to client server structure, the folder structure. I mean, we had to work with the view engine because when you the architecture of a web app in .NET is when you navigate the Razor view engine, that's the class, is the one that tells the app where to look for the views. So the standard is when you create an MVC, it looks for the your project, goes to the view and check the route. So go to index, it goes to the view of home and checks the route. So in this case, we just need to. So this is where these I'll post all the code. I would put a link to the GitHub in my. I'll drop it in the chat as we go, and then I would put the link there. So this is what I did. This was the biggest work that I did. It was just a matter of telling the view where to look for my UI. So I did a lot of naming. So when you want to look for a view, just go into client. So this is everything for the Razor view engine. So just go into my folder, client UI. So go into my folder, client, the name of the controller, welcome, and where the views itself, where they live. We have index, privacy, and so it still brings the thinking of views, the design of views into it. But this time, anyone that picks up your project knows without telling him that, oh, this person is using a client server architecture. So after I did this view engine, so I put my layout in the layout folder, and then I have this view import view start. So I just went into startup. This is .NET 6. So we say, I think we're not having in startup, you're having program.cs. I did a couple of shuttling, and this was where I told the view where to look for my views. So I just told the Razor view engine, oh, this is where you should check for my views. And the other part was this part of I think we would have seen this part. Oh, sorry, I can't see any question if you have any. I think I've been talking without it. So we can see I'm sure we have seen this code before. Use static files. These are what serves the JS files, the CSS files. So, but in my case, I have my static files inside the client folder and the WWs. So that's why I pointed to here. Now, so request part. Those are so this change here and this change here was what I had to do to achieve this architecture. Now, so when you build your app or when you think in terms of architecture, you think, okay, let the server do this. Let's put a security on the server. You don't need it on the client. You just know intuitively that, oh, go to this and do your. So the server in my case was actually because this is a web app, not a single page application like you have for Vue and maybe backend in web API. This is a full web app. So we have the server contains the services, the model. This is where you declare the database structure, connecting to the database and everything. So if it's just a simple app. It doesn't do anything that much, right? I'm trying to run it. So so this is the app. You see, it maintains all the CSS files that we have with the normal MVC. This is the CS styling you get when you create it from the template. So let's now go back to the slide. So I already showed you the code. This is where I told the view engine what to use, and this is a little change I made to the program.cs now. So the question is the adequate? Because figuring out how to set it up correctly, how to set up the Razor View engine, the different files, how to set them up correctly. Is the adequate? Yes, because I actually use it. So majorly my work now has entailed more of API development and API integration and lean front end. So, and I use most of the times I'm using a layered architecture, and I could tell you that this takes full advantage of thinking in terms of this is the software architecture, this is the code. So you think the UI should have something, just go to your code, the folder, and you make the change. And this is the one of the interesting usage or benefit of using this. So you have to make a match, and most of us it's match complete. I do too. So you have to make a match complete. There was a product or a change that needs to be done in the server. So you need to make a match. You don't expect to see a change in the client folder because the discussion was the change in the server folder. So this gives you a thinking, or you're telling the story. So you think along the design architecture, the code, and everything it makes up into one. So yes, and it takes advantage of the particular design pattern. There are reasons why we are using a particular software design pattern. And if you can transfer it into the folder structure, you have the advantages of that software architecture, you can bring it in. So I will end on this note. As I said, writing a code is like telling a story. You can make it an awful experience where you have your readers find out how it plays out. There are codes like that we are wondering, where is this? Where is this? Where is that folder? Or you can lead them gently and tell them, this is a presentation layer. Well, you should see everything that has to do with the UI. So that's what I have. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please, I would appreciate it. Thank you again. So over to everyone. Over to Falabi. Hello.
Thank you very much, Simi. I think Dan asked the question if you have a blog post or if there's a documentation that describes.
Okay, so
And if you also have questions, please feel free to drop it in the comment section or chat, or raise your hands so I could ask you to speak up and ask your questions.
Okay, so to the code reference, I would drop this PDF of the present. It's available on GitHub, so you can scan this if you can now. I will also drop the PDF of the presentation with the organizer. Concerning the blog post, no, I've not prepared that yet. I've not published that yet. I've not published that yet. But yeah. So
thank you very much. Okay, I think Ayinde also had a question. Ayinde, are you here?
yes, I think the question was, is the code base available for reference?
Yeah, I will definitely share the what's it called, the GitHub link. We'll post it. See, what I think what you can also do is you can just copy the link to the GitHub and just drop it on Zoom, on the Zoom comment section.
Okay, doing that now.
Okay.
So the GitHub section has two branches. The master shows the original MVC template, while you have the client server show the result when you have a client server architecture. So that's the notes there.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, bro. Okay, any other questions? Further questions? Okay, I'm dropping a link now on the group for everyone who is not part of our mailing list. You can subscribe on the mailing list here. For everyone who is not part of the mailing list, we would definitely send out the presentation. Would wrap it up, that is, we'll bundle everything together and do a meeting or event recap and send it out by Monday for everyone who missed out or thereabout, for them to be able to review it. We would also upload the video up onto YouTube as well for those who were not able to make it. So two important links for you to be able to get this content. One is for you to join the mailing list. I just posted the link. The second one is also for you to join our meetup community, where you'll be notified about subsequent events, information, resources, and all of that. So feel free to check out that. I'd previously also shared the link to our WhatsApp group, which is always active every single day. You can easily get hold of as many other developers as possible in there to be able to network, discuss, ask questions, and all sorts, and all of that. I don't know if we have any other questions from anybody, general questions or thereabouts that you want us to discuss or anything before we wind it down with some music and then shut down the space by 2 o'clock. Okay, good question. When is our next meetup? Yes, we're looking at starting a quick beginner series, which will be handled by Catherine, the first speaker, Catherine Fadamiro, which will basically be like an introduction to software development and also C# series. We're looking at having that within maybe 2 Saturdays or 3 Saturdays. That will be communicated on or before by Monday, during the Monday email. It will be there during the Monday newsletter that will go out. Also, I can see your question about any physical meetup planned. Though we had a physical hangout, I think a few people over here came in VI. It was not like a typical meetup. It was just a kind of like a TGIF thing. But for events proper, would mostly be looking at sometimes it could be before the end of this year, but mostly from January, we'll be back to physical events. I think the major concern we always have with physical events is getting a location or having an organization to sponsor or support us. Due to COVID, a number of organizations had started working remotely and all of that. And it's been, what's it called? It's been kind of like interesting to get hold of organizations to try to support in this new dispensation. So we're looking forward to getting sponsors or so. If you know any organization or know anyone that would like to sponsor us, we're not a big community. We're just 1,798, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of our number, in terms of our size, immediate size in terms of members that we have their details and have their information and who are also active. But on a larger scale, impact level, I think we have like, I think 4,000 or 5,000 members or thereabout. So yes, if you have any organization or thereabout that wants to sponsor, support, or wants to have conversations with us, feel free to reach out. My Twitter handle is @falabs. Let me just post it here one more time for those who do not know. And my email is quite simple, abisoye@outlook.com. My email, let me just put it here as well, outlook.com. I want to thank each and everyone for tuning in for today's program. I'm going to leave the space to some music for the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes before shutting it down. I want to appreciate everyone for taking out time to be part of this program today. And we hope that we'll see you more often. We want to thank our speakers, featuring Fadamiro, Dan Moore, and Adegoke Similoluwa. We really want to appreciate you for taking out time out of your busy schedule to be part of us today to speak to us. We really appreciate, and we hope to have more of you come speak to us, more time to come and speak to us. Thank you very much, everyone, and do enjoy.